So with that in mind, all of a sudden, we seem to be talking about something other than coronavirus in the news. And we could see what consumers think about this. So given all the things that are happening in our world, in our communities right now, nearly 60% of consumers, 58% say, I hope the media focuses on something other than COVID. There are more important issues that need coverage right now. A majority of consumers, and not coincidentally, the exact same percentage agreed with this, that seeing the coverage of the protests has reminded me that we should focus on other things besides just coronavirus. I mean, this is fairly remarkable in that the coverage has been of nothing but COVID nonstop since early March. And now there are other things in life that we've decided are really worth talking about. So one of the books that I love, and I've encouraged a lot of our folks to read, is this wonderful book called Influence by Robert Cialdini, in which he talks about sort of the 6 sort of principles of influence and persuasion. And one of those principles is something called social proof, which is you sort of look for cues of what other people are doing to inform you on what you should be doing as well. And as it relates to COVID, here's something that consumers tell us, which is 44%, which is a pretty big number, say that lots of people right now are breaking the social distancing rules. So there's really no point in following them myself. I think there is some sort of a critical mass type of thing that happens, right? Certainly the critical mass tends right now still toward wearing masks and being very careful when we go out. But at some point we'll dip below like a certain level that may signal just even, subconsciously to others that we don't need to follow the same rules. And again, I'm not saying this is the right thing to do, but it looks like we may be heading in that direction just based on consumer sentiment and what we know about how people act and behave. On the restaurant side of things, some of these things they're doing really is manifested in different types of behaviors in terms of how they actually get food. So here the question is, hey, think about, stuff that you plan on maybe doing more or less of after shelter restrictions are lifted. So as you emerge from the pandemic, you're allowed to go out of your house again. What are your long-term behaviors? What do you think they're going to be? And you can see in the green bars, these are things that people say I'm going to do more of. The black bars are things that I say I'm going to do less of. And it's not a surprise. A lot of people say I plan on eating less inside of a restaurant. But they also say I plan on ordering at the counter much less often than I have. And instead, I'm doing more calling ahead to place an order or ordering via the restaurant's website or app, sort of that order ahead behavior to sort of counterbalance that. That's sort of the key thing. So one of the things that the pandemic has done is it's accelerating behaviors that were already on trend and we're likely to continue growing, and it's just made them faster. And order ahead is probably the big one there, where during the days of the pandemic, ordering ahead is just as common as ordering at the counter, which was never true in the past. I would also sort of point out that you see an uptick in using a restaurant's website or app to order, but you do not see that same uptick for third-party delivery, right? So if you can see my mouse wiggling around for these bars over here. And that really can be traced back to the experiences that people have had with third-party as it relates to pricing and the fees that they've had to pay. And there's a tremendous demand for a better fee structure, certainly for consumers, but frankly, also for restaurants too, many of which are finding it very hard to cope with the commissions and still remain profitable.
And I think people really want to support the restaurants directly.
Yes, yeah, there's some services popping up to help them do that too, which is notable. We'll see if any of them really get the scale that they need. Yeah, I mean, we've had those things where, like invoices from some of the third-party marketplaces circulating on social media, sparking a little bit of outrage. There's been quite a lot of that. The other thing we've seen is that cars have really become a safe haven for consumers. Cars are sort of part of each person's protective bubble. All of a sudden, it's like sort of your own personal bubble. And when people are asked, hey, what's the safest way to get food? Over half say curbside or drive-through wins it for me right now. So you almost want to think of the car as an extension of the person themselves, right? that becomes their real personal space. You want to make sure you respect that. You do not violate it. And from here, we're seeing entirely new types of behavior, which maybe seem a little weird at first, but are actually sort of cool. You're seeing things like parking lot picnics, where people are just sort of getting some food, parking in a parking lot, open up the tailgate, and just having like a picnic in the parking lot somewhere. So keep in mind that the car is a more important way of eating than before, more important way of getting food. And you may want to start thinking about making foods that are really easy or designed to be eaten in the car. And if you want to get really progressive, imagine a future, again, this depends on timelines and when technology and government approvals happen, where the steering wheel is taken off those cars and they're driving themselves around, by themselves. And inside you just have like a table or something. You'd have a full-blown fork and knife meal one day. So start thinking about car eating, not just for today, but maybe for the future too. And the way that we want to think about safety, and we're going to look at a full service example over here. So the question is, what would need to happen for you to feel safe again dining in a sit-down restaurant? So in a sit-down restaurant. And you can see there's some things at the top, right? Spacing out the tables, people wearing masks, a lot of things we've talked about for a number of weeks now, really clean restrooms, gloves, etc. But those are the top items that go up to smaller capacity, smaller capacity and beyond and above. Those are sort of like your table stakes, so to speak. And then you have a whole host of other things that we could potentially do that each would make people feel a little incrementally more safe, but that none of them by themselves is ultimately completely required as its own distinct act. And this list is basically just a short list out of hundreds, if not thousands, of different things you could potentially do. And the answer is sort of this, that you want to make sure you cover the table stakes, and then you want to sort of have a full, complete program that includes some of the other items as well. And in a way, it becomes less about the specific action item itself and more about how they are sort of brought together in a package that makes consumers just feel comfortable. And the thing that we think is most important here is not just what that package is, but you do it in a really professional way. So chain restaurants will probably excel at this because it's going to come from corporate, and all the signage and the merchandise and the stickers on the floor and whatnot will be professionally printed, and it'll feel really well thought out. Independent restaurants might have the hand-scribbled note or the police tape that you get at Home Depot or something, and that might freak consumers out because it's going to look like, wow, did they really even think about this? Or do they just sort of cobble this together? So it's really important to do this professionally and show the consumer that you've thought this through. So with that, we thought it'd be interesting to take a look at the operator's perspective. And we'll do a little bit of this each week, a little bit around consumer, a little bit around operator. And let's take a look at the current operator situation. So I want to debut what looks like a scary subway route map, essentially, but it's much more than that. This is the recovery timeline for food service. And what you're seeing plotted here is the level of, let's say, business in each one of these segments, month over month, compared to what a normal 2020 would have looked like. So you can see that some segments start recovering a little bit more quickly. Some segments ramp up faster than others, and some segments plateau earlier than others too. So something like travel and leisure, the recovery is already beginning, but it's at a very, very slow rate. And even after recovery ends, we're still down probably about 30% day to day versus what a normal normal day in 2020 would have looked like. Other segments will recover and get back pretty close to what normal levels of business will look like on a day versus day basis. If you look at some of the more specific segments like K through 12 and C&U, colleges versus schools, you see there are really differences there, right? School, K through 12 operators, 2/3 of them say I expect things are gonna be back to normal in the fall. Versus just 1/3 of college operators, food service operators say, I think things are gonna be back to normal, right? Colleges are more likely to say, hey, I think we might be doing some distance learning, or it's unclear if our campus will even be open. Schools have said, yeah, it'll probably be back to normal. And even if they're not, there's still probably gonna be other plans to get meals to kids and families somehow. So this is really a segment specific recovery. It's not as though all of food service is going to come back at the exact same rate. It really is going to depend on the specific segment. And I would like to bring back, I think, one of the most important insights that we've learned from operators so far. And it's a real simple thing. When do you expect to be reopened fully? So you're offering food in all the ways you want, dine in, whatever. And then when do you expect your traffic to be back to normal? So the blue line is when you expect to be reopened fully. The pink line, when do you expect your traffic to be back to normal levels? Operators expect to be fully operational pretty soon, like essentially now, right? That's our expectation. We're going to be reopened, doing what we do. But we don't think traffic is going to get back to where it once was until September or later. That gap, that window between today and September is the golden opportunity for suppliers to the industry to work with operators to figure out how to really get things right. That window is the golden window for operators to really think about the way they do business and their menu and everything else and get ready for a return to normal levels of traffic. So I think we are seriously in like run mode right now, where there is, 3 months, let's say, of time to really figure things out in anticipation of traffic coming back. And I would encourage, all of your businesses, if you are either a supplier to the industry or if you're an operator yourself, really focus on getting stuff rolled out in the months ahead. Because once traffic is fully back to normal, it's really hard to change something that's already in motion. But right now we can do a lot of change.